K.W. Krieger presents The Obscura Dossier, Episode 22, The Thornton Manuscripts. Statement of Dr. Alistair Thornton, recorded between May and June 1922, concerning the events surrounding the admittance of a particular patient under his care at Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Statement begins. Doctor's notes. Patient, Mr. Oscar Bennett. Date, May 15th, 1922. Case notes. Initial assessment. Mr. Oscar Bennett, age 32, was admitted following a severe episode of acute psychosis. He presented in a state of extreme agitation and emotional disarray. His appearance was markedly gaunt, with pronounced insomnia and fatigue evident in his physical demeanor. Upon arrival, he was preoccupied with persistent, vivid experiences relating to a particular painting, which he described in terms that suggested profound perceptual disturbance and paranoid ideation. His speech was rapid and pressured, often lapsing into incoherent digressions. He appeared wholly convinced of the reality of his perceptions, which he described as hostile and animate in nature. Though his accounts lacked coherence, the intensity of his conviction suggested genuine terror. Observations and initial impressions. Upon admission, Mr. Bennett displayed pronounced psychomotor agitation, alternating between defensive rigidity and erratic pacing. His verbal output consisted of fragmented associations with abrupt thematic shifts. Periodically, he would recoil or gesture toward empty space as though perceiving external stimuli invisible to others. Notably, a viscous residue was observed on his hands and forearms. The substance could not be immediately identified and has been sent for laboratory analysis. He appeared unaware of its presence and became distressed when questioned about it. During these episodes, he repeatedly alluded to the painting's living essence, his tone oscillating between awe and dread. While the content of these delusions remains obscure, his effective presentation indicated overwhelming fear and confusion. Clinical interview and patient history. Mr. Bennett's verbal narrative revealed a persistent fixation on the painting, which he spoke of as though it possessed agency or consciousness. His discourse was marked by disorganization, with occasional lucid intervals in which he appeared acutely aware of his own mental disintegration. He described sensations of being observed or influenced by unseen forces, though without specific attribution. Between bouts of agitation, Mr. Bennett would lapse into near catatonic silence, punctuated by murmured repetitions of disconnected phases. Physical tension, shallow respiration, and diaphoresis were recurrent throughout these episodes. When questioned, he expressed simultaneous reverence and terror toward what he perceived as the subject of his hallucinations, referring to it only as it. Medical examination and diagnostic impressions. Comprehensive physical and neurological evaluations revealed no organic abnormalities sufficient to explain his presentation. Laboratory findings, aside from elevated stress hormone levels, were unremarkable. The physiological profile is consistent with sustained hyperarousal and extreme anxiety. Despite intermittent clarity, Mr. Bennett's thought processes remain dominated by delusional constructs resistant to rational challenge. His insight is minimal, and he demonstrates partial orientation to time and place. The differential diagnosis includes acute psychotic episode, possibly precipitated by prolonged stress or exposure to traumatic stimuli of uncertain nature. Treatment plan. Immediate pharmacological intervention has been initiated to manage psychotic symptoms and reduce agitation. Antipsychotic medication will be administered alongside sedative support as required. A structured regimen emphasizing rest and stabilization has been instituted. Given the patient's obsessive focus on visual expression, limited and supervised art therapy sessions are proposed as a diagnostic adjunct to evaluate the content and structure of his delusional system. Continuous monitoring is advised due to fluctuating affect and unpredictable behavior. While the etiology of his condition remains indeterminate, his presentation suggests a rapid and profound psychological decomposition. Further observation will determine whether this represents a transient psychotic break or a more entrenched disorder of thought. Dr. Thornton, Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Doctor's Notes. Patient, Mr. Oscar Bennett. Date, May 22nd, 1922. Case Notes. 1 week follow-up. 1 week following admission, Mr. Bennett's condition remains grave, marked by persistent delusional fixation and episodic agitation. While pharmacological intervention has mitigated the more overt manifestations of distress, restlessness, heightened arousal, and incoherent speech, it has failed to disrupt the underlying delusional framework. His preoccupation continues to center upon a particular painting, which he regards with both fascination and fear. Clinical status. Though calmer in demeanor, Mr. Bennett's discourse reveals deepening psychotic content. He refers to the painting as a gateway and alludes to perceived movement or activity within its surface. His language remains metaphorical and obscure, suggesting complex internal imagery rather than coherent narrative thought. Despite its implausibility, his account is delivered with striking consistency and emotional intensity. Episodes of nocturnal agitation persist. Attendants report recurring night terrors accompanied by vocalizations and physical thrashing. Upon waking, he displays profound disorientation with physiological markers of extreme stress, tachycardia, diaphoresis, and tremor. During interviews, he appears fatigued with a vacant or disassociative gaze suggestive of persistent perceptual disturbance. Patient engagement and cooperation. Mr. Bennett intermittently demonstrates brief periods of lucidity during which he engages cooperatively with staff and exhibits partial insight into his condition. However, these moments are transient. His fixation upon the painting and its perceived significance remains unyielding. Efforts at cognitive redirection and grounding produce only temporary reprieve before he reverts to his central delusional theme. He has begun to describe elaborate dream imagery, vast, distorted landscapes, and undefined presences, which he recounts with conviction. These descriptions are increasingly detailed, blurring the distinction between dream content and waking perception. When questioned, he insists that these experiences are not dreams but visions, asserting that they possess tangible reality. Medication response. Antipsychotic therapy has reduced overt behavioral disturbance but has not diminished the intensity of his fixed beliefs. Sedatives administered to address sleep disturbances have yielded inconsistent benefit, with some evidence of paradoxical worsening of his nightmares. The persistence and vividness of his delusions suggest limited pharmacological efficacy at current dosages. Adjustment of medication regimen is under consideration to better manage nocturnal agitation and intrusive ideation. Art therapy and symbolic expression. Early sessions in art therapy reveal imagery of remarkable complexity and emotional charge. His compositions exhibit intricate spatial distortions and ambiguous figures rendered with precision. The symbolic content appears consistent with his delusional framework, though expressed with notable technical skill. The recurrence of abstract geometric forms and cryptic symbols may warrant psychoanalytic interpretation as manifestations of internal conflict and fragmentation. While these artworks provide valuable insight into his psychopathology, their production often precipitates distress, suggesting that engagement with these themes may exacerbate rather than alleviate his symptoms. Further sessions will be conducted under closer supervision with attention to minimizing emotional overstimulation. Family consultation. Collateral history from relatives confirms that Mr. Bennett exhibited no prior psychiatric symptoms. He was described as a disciplined and successful artist of sound temperament. His acute decline occurred within weeks of completing and selling the painting now associated with his delusional preoccupation. The temporal correlation between this event and his subsequent breakdown remains clinically significant but unexplained. Treatment plan adjustment. Given the persistence of delusional fixation and emergence of severe nocturnal disturbance, treatment will proceed with a dual emphasis on stabilization and structured psychotherapeutic engagement. Pharmacological adjustments will be implemented to optimize antipsychotic efficacy and address sleep dysregulation. Art therapy will continue as a controlled diagnostic modality rather than a primary intervention. The prognosis remains guarded. Mr. Bennett's delusional system appears resistant to rational correction, and the symbolic content of his hallucinations continues to dominate his perception and behavior. Continued observation and gradual cognitive reintegration are recommended. Dr. Thornton, Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Doctor's Notes. Patient, Mr. Oscar Bennett. Date, May 25th, 1922. Incident Report. Aggressive behavior towards staff. During a scheduled therapeutic session, Mr. Bennett exhibited an abrupt and severe escalation of aggressive behavior, culminating in a physical assault upon attending physician Dr. Lawson. The episode was unprovoked and characterized by intense psychomotor agitation and violent outburst. The patient's effect during the incident was one of uncontrolled rage, accompanied by persecutory verbalizations directed at Dr. Lawson. Clinical status. Following the incident, Mr. Bennett was physically restrained by orderlies and administered intramuscular sedation. Despite subsequent calm, he remains highly paranoid and preoccupied with delusional interpretations of staff actions. He repeatedly referred to Dr. Lawson as being under the painting's control, and made further disorganized statements implying that external forces act through others to influence him. His speech is pressured and fragmented, alternating between accusatory and imploring tones. Physical signs during the episode: dilated pupils, flushed complexion, and pronounced tremors, indicated extreme sympathetic activation. Since the event, he has exhibited fluctuating levels of consciousness and persistent verbal hostility towards medical personnel. The violent outburst underscores a marked deterioration in his mental state, with his delusional system expanding to incorporate his immediate environment. His aggression appears reactive to perceived threats stemming from his central delusional construct. Injury assessment and safety measures. Dr. Lawson sustained multiple superficial lacerations and bruising to the forearms, consistent with defensive injuries incurred during patient restraint. No permanent damage was sustained. The incident prompted an immediate review of institutional safety measures, and Mr. Bennett has been placed under continuous observation in a secured ward, with all non-essential interactions suspended until further notice. Environmental modifications have been implemented, including removal of potential hazards and reinforcement of restraint protocols. Staff are advised to maintain a minimum 2-person presence during any necessary engagement with the patient. Medication adjustment and therapeutic suspension. Mr. Bennett's pharmacological regimen has been modified to include a higher dose sedative protocol to manage acute agitation and reduce recurrence risk. His standing antipsychotic medication will continue with dosage reassessments scheduled upon stabilization. All therapeutic sessions, including art therapy, are suspended indefinitely pending psychiatric review. These measures are considered temporary but necessary to ensure the safety of both patient and staff. While pharmacological sedation has achieved partial suppression of aggressive impulses, his delusional ideation remains intact and resistant to logical intervention. Family consultation. Mr. Bennett's family has been informed of the escalation and reassured regarding institutional precautions. They report increasing distress regarding his condition's rapid decline, and the correlation between his psychiatric deterioration and the period surrounding the completion and sale of his most recent artwork remains a consistent point of reference in their accounts, though no external precipitant has yet been substantiated. Clinical considerations and prognosis. The recent aggression represents a significant regression in Mr. Bennett's clinical trajectory. His persecutory delusions have intensified, extending to include staff as perceived antagonists. Insight is absent, and reality testing remains severely impaired. Ongoing management will prioritize containment, sedation, and gradual reintroduction of therapeutic engagement once stabilization is achieved. Prognosis remains poor at this stage, given the rapid deterioration, entrenched delusional content, and emerging hostility. Dr. Thornton, Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Personal Journal, May 27th, 1922. I record these reflections with an unsteady hand, for my recent experiences within these walls of Sanctuary Meadows have begun to erode the boundaries between observation and unease. What began as the clinical study of Mr. Oscar Bennett has grown into something far less certain, an encounter with phenomena that defy the comfortable parameters of medicine or reason. Mr. Bennett's condition, once dismissed as florid psychosis, now presents with an unsettling consistency. His language, fragmented, fevered, yet strangely lucid, suggests not random delusion but conviction. He speaks not as a man lost to madness, but as one attempting to describe something glimpsed just beyond the limits of comprehension. I have long resisted lending credence to such accounts, yet, as of late, I find that resistance waning. Since the unfortunate altercation involving Dr. Lawson, there have been occurrences within the institution that cannot be easily explained. The electric lights, which were steady and dependable, now flicker in precise rhythmic intervals. The pattern is regular enough to evade explanation as a mechanical fault, and yet seem too deliberate to ignore. On several nights I have observed the effect myself. Shadows that distort and move against the direction of the light, and shapes that seem to elongate and recoil as though in response to unseen motion. Doors thought locked have been found ajar, and footsteps echo in empty corridors long after the staff have retired. And the disappearance of the janitor, though plausibly explained as desertion, has unsettled us all. The atmosphere of the ward has grown oppressive, charged with a tension that seems to emanate from the very walls. Even the patients, those least attuned to reason, speak in whispers that mirror fragments of Bennett's speech, of something moving within the structure itself. I have tried, in my capacity as a physician, to impose the discipline of logic upon these impressions. Yet, as the nights pass, the rational explanations grow thin. When Mr. Bennett speaks of the building as though it possesses awareness, I should feel only pity. Instead, I find myself listening too closely and searching for his words, a pattern for proof. He said to me yesterday quite calmly, "It knows us now." The phrases followed me since. At times while moving through the lower corridors, I sense a presence just beyond perception, an awareness that retreats when confronted, but not entirely. It is the peculiar sensation of being observed by something that does not breathe, yet listens. The institution now feels altered, its silence too deep, its architecture unfamiliar in the dim light. Even the air carries a weight that was not there before, a faint vibration, as though the building itself was straining towards some inaudible frequency. I would attribute all this to fatigue, to the contagion of hysteria that can afflict those who spend too long among the unwell. And yet, when I close my eyes, I see the shapes Mr. Bennett paints in his confinement, contours that recall the very distortions I glimpse upon the walls. His ravings are beginning to feel less like invention and more like transmission. I can no longer deny the creeping sense that something intangible has taken root here. Sanctuary Meadows feels changed, watchful. Mr. Bennett's decline and the institution's disquiet are, I fear, not unrelated. Whether this is coincidence or something far more dreadful, I cannot say. Tonight I shall ensure the locks on my door are secured, though I do so with little conviction. It is a hollow gesture, one of ritual rather than protection. For if what I sense is real, whatever stirs within these walls, it will not be turned aside by bolts or keys. Dr. Michael Thornton. Doctor's notes. Patient, Mr. Oscar Bennett. Date, May 31st, 1922. Clinical observation. Escalation of unusual behavior. Mr. Bennett's condition has entered a new and deeply concerning phase. During a scheduled inspection of his quarters, staff discovered that the walls were covered in markings. Intricate geometric designs carved directly into the plaster. Their precision and uniformity are striking. The origin of these etchings and the means by which they were executed remain unknown. No suitable implements were found in the room, and Mr. Bennett himself offers only cryptic explanations. Patient's mental state. When questioned, Mr. Bennett stated that the markings serve as a protection against what approaches. He describes a sense of imminent danger, claiming that unseen entities seek to reach him. His effect during these exchanges is one of profound terror, yet also of solemn purpose, as though he perceives his actions as necessary. The symbols themselves appear to follow no recognizable linguistic or symbolic tradition. Despite exhaustive comparison, they cannot be aligned with any known written system or occult taxonomy. Their recurrence and complexity suggest either a highly organized delusional structure or the product of an obsessive-compulsive process driven by fear. Mr. Bennett's speech has grown increasingly fragmented. He repeats phrases such as, "It is coming," and "They are at the door," sometimes whispering, at other times shouting in distress. These expressions are consistent with auditory or perceptual disturbances. The emotional intensity accompanying them, however, conveys genuine dread rather than performative hysteria. Environmental risk assessment. The patient's room has been cleared of all objects that could serve as tools for further defacement or self-injury. Continuous monitoring has been instituted, yet uncertainty remains as to how the carvings were made in the first place. Several attendants have remarked that the markings appear deeper upon each inspection, a subjective observation, but one not easily dismissed given the consistency of the reports. Attempts to remove or paint over the carvings have proven unsuccessful. The fresh paint peels within hours, as though repelled by the underlying surface. The staff assigned to the task report unease, describing a sense of resistance emanating from the walls themselves. Though such claims cannot be substantiated, the collective apprehension within the ward has grown pronounced. Family consultation. Mr. Bennett's family has been notified of the latest developments. Their response reflects both disbelief and sorrow. His sister in particular expressed the hope that the man he was might still be reached, though she conceded that he is now unrecognizable to her. As I recounted the event of recent days, I have found myself unable to reassure her. There are aspects of this case that no medical language can comfortably contain. Adjustments to treatment plan. Mr. Bennett's pharmacological regimen has been strengthened. A higher dose sedative has been added to address nocturnal agitation and insomnia. However, I am increasingly doubtful that medication alone can attest the progression of his condition. His art therapy sessions remain suspended indefinitely. His most recent works, disquieting compositions of impossible geometry and fluid, shifting forms, evoked visible distress among the staff. These artistic expressions seem less therapeutic than symptomatic, reflecting an interior world that continues to expand beyond the reach of reason. Further considerations. Specialists from outside the institution have been invited to examine the carvings, though it is unclear what value their expertise will bring. The atmosphere within Sanctuary Meadows has grown tense. Staff avoid unnecessary contact with the patient quarters, and a palpable heaviness pervades the air. And even the most rational among us admit to feeling watched. Though I am committed to the principles of clinical observation, I cannot wholly dismiss the unease that has taken root within me. There is a quality to these events that defies categorization, something not entirely confined to psychosis or environment. Whether we are witnessing a rare and catastrophic collapse of the human mind or something that touches upon the unknown, I cannot yet say. Dr. Thornton, Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Personal Journal, June 4th, 1922. The days grow darker, though the sun still drags its weary light across the sky, indifferent to what festers below. Sanctuary Meadows no longer feels like an institution of care. It breathes. It listens. It remembers. The air itself hums with something vile and electric. A presence that presses against the skin like a fever dream made real. The staff try to maintain composure, but fear lingers in every whispered conversation, every hesitant footstep that echoes down the halls. The lockdown has been lifted, officially. We are to return to normal operations, but there is no normal left here. The silence feels staged, as though the building itself is holding its breath, waiting. The gouges on the walls and doors persist despite repeated attempts to erase them. Deep, precise incisions cut through plaster and paint alike, marks that seem less made than imposed. Security can offer no explanation. No tools have been found, no evidence of intruders or vandalism. Yet the scratches remain, crawling outward like veins. Their patterns too deliberate to be random. At times, in the flicker of failing light, I could swear they shift, stretching, coiling, like a language that is learning to speak. Bennett insists they are connected to it, the same force he once claimed dwelled within his painting. He speaks of claws that tear not flesh but thought itself, a thing that drags madness in its wake. "It's coming closer," he told me this morning, his voice raw from sleeplessness. "Closer every night." His conviction has begun to infect the staff. Even the most pragmatic among us now avoid his door after sunset. I have tried to cling to reason, to anchor myself in evidence and procedure, but the evidence defies me. The marks grow thicker, the lights falter, the nights are filled with sounds that have no clear origin. Scraping, breathing, the faint rhythm of something moving just beyond the walls. At first, I thought the mind played tricks in the dark. Now, I am no longer certain. There is a pattern emerging. A slow, deliberate spread of the markings throughout the building. Like a disease seeking the heart of its host. It is as though the very structure of Sanctuary Meadows is transforming, responding to something unseen yet intimately near. Bennett's madness may not be contagious in the medical sense, but it has seeped into us nonetheless. We all feel it now, the tightening, suffocating awareness that we are being watched. Talk has begun of relocation, of abandoning the institution altogether, but I know deep down that such efforts would be futile. Whatever this is, it will not be left behind. It has already sunk its roots into the foundation, into us. Sanctuary Meadows is no longer merely a place, it is now awake and listening. Or at least, something inside it is. Tonight, I will not sleep. The lights in my office have begun to dim at intervals, flickering in slow, deliberate pulses, as though responding to an unseen heartbeat. I can feel it now, that same cadence thrumming beneath the floorboards. It feels like anticipation. Should these pages survive me, let them stand as a record of what reason could not contain. There are things in this world, and beyond it, that recoil from the light, yet thrive in the cracks of human understanding. We have opened those cracks too wide, and something has begun to look back. Dr. Michael Thornton, Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Personal Journal, June 8th, 1922. The atmosphere within Sanctuary Meadows has grown nearly unbearable. What began as unease has metastasized into dread. An invisible pressure that thickens the air and distorts even the simplest perception. Time itself feels unreliable. Days bleed into nights, and nights into something far older. A darkness that seems to stretch beyond the bounds of reason. The official investigation into the claw marks has concluded without explanation. Security reports no evidence of intruders, and the wildlife specialists, pale and hesitant, have insisted that no animal could produce such precise, deliberate destruction. Yet the gouges remain deep, exact, almost purposeful, as if some unseen intelligence carved its message into the very bones of this place. We pretend at normalcy. Rounds continue, treatments resume, reports are filled, but the silence between tasks feels staged, brittle. Conversations falter mid-sentence as the lights flicker. A faint vibration hums through walls like a pulse. The institution endures. But it does not feel simply alive. It feels aware. Mr. Bennett has grown more agitated, more prophetic. His conviction that something stalks him has hardened into certainty. He now insists the institution itself acts as a conduit for this malign force. The air here is tainted. The air here is tainted, he said to me yesterday, his voice low and trembling. It speaks, Doctor. You don't hear it yet, but you will. I might have dismissed this as delirium had I not felt the same oppressive weight, the same prickling awareness that I am not alone, even in solitude. When he speaks of whispers, I remember the faint murmuring that seems to ripple through the corridors after midnight. When he describes shadows that move against the light, I recall the shifting shapes I've seen in the reflection of the observation glass. Each detail he offers finds its echo in my own experience, and the boundary between patient and physician begins to blur. This morning I found him crouched in the corner of his room, muttering in a language that seemed to twist the air around him. His fingernails were bloodied. On the walls, new symbols. They seemed to pulse in the dim light as though alive, and their lines contorting when I tried to focus on them. I forced myself to ask what they meant. They're wards, he said, his eyes wide. Without them, it will come for me, for all of us. The markings have since been scrubbed away, though the act itself feels like desecration. The workers complained of nausea and dizziness as they removed them, and several swore the symbols returned faintly beneath the paint, as if the wall itself refused to forget. I too feel their residue, etched not in plaster now, but in thought. The staff are fraying, their eyes dart to every shadow. One nurse spoke to me in whispers, her hands shaking, describing sounds from the basement, scraping, rhythmic, like something vast dragging itself just beneath the floor. I offered her reassurance. I did not believe, for I too have felt it. The faint tremor that runs through the floorboards in the quiet hours as if something below shifts in its sleep. I fear we have crossed a threshold from which there is no return. The events surrounding Mr. Bennett are no longer isolated pathology. They have become environmental, pervasive. The lights, the sounds, the marks, they form a pattern, one that tightens around us like a snare. Perhaps this is not illness, but infestation. Tonight, I will walk the corridors myself. I must see. I must know. Yet, even as I prepare, I feel the futility of the act. Whatever haunts these halls does not need to hide. It waits, patient and certain. I sense it closer now, the way one senses thunder before it breaks. There is something within Sanctuary Meadows that feeds upon fear, upon the fragile line between mind and matter. It has tasted our dread and found it good. Dr. Michael Thornton, Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Doctor's notes. Patient, Mr. Oscar Bennett. Date, June 9th, 1922. I scarcely have the strength to pen these words, for the events of this morning have shaken me to my core and stripped away any illusion of reason or safety. Mr. Bennett is dead, though to call what I found in his room death is to demean the word, for his remains speak of an annihilation so grotesque, so profoundly unnatural, that I can scarcely comprehend it. When I entered his quarters, the air was thick, metallic, and suffocating. A miasma that clung to the lungs and skin alike. The room was a scene of unthinkable carnage. Blood was smeared across every surface in patterns that defied natural explanation. Splashes and streaks that suggested not chaos but intent, as though some malign artist had painted a testament to its depravity. The walls bore crude, jagged symbols that mirrored those Mr. Bennett had etched in desperation days before, yet these marks were more precise, more purposeful. His body, or what little remained of it, was scattered in a fashion that defies human understanding. Limbs torn from their sockets lay in grotesque disarray, their angles unnatural, their flesh rent by no weapon I could identify. His torso was mangled, his chest cavity torn open as though by claws belonging to no earthly creature. The expression frozen on what was left of his face, a grimace of indescribable terror, haunts me even now. The room bore no sign of forced entry, no evidence of struggle beyond the grotesque aftermath. The door was locked from the inside, and the window, barred and secured, remained untouched. How then did this abomination occur? What force could have breached the sanctity of his quarters unseen and left behind no trace save the unspeakable horror of its work? The staff is in shock, their composure shattered by what they have witnessed. I heard whispers among the orderlies, murmurs of curses and vengeful spirits, and I cannot bring myself to rebuke them. The rational explanations I have clung to now seem woefully inadequate, unable to account for the terror that grips this place. I have reported the incident to law enforcement. though I harbor no hope that their investigation will yield any clarity. How can they explain what is clearly unexplainable? What science, what earthly reason could account for the force that tore Mr. Bennet asunder? The power outage during the night, lasting a mere 15 minutes, may hold the key, yet it only deepens the mystery. The blackout was brief, uneventful by all accounts, but it was during this window of darkness that the unimaginable occurred. The thought plagues me. Was this force, the entity Mr. Bennet feared, summoned by his own hand? Did his desperate etchings, his pleas to the unseen, open a door that should have remained sealed? His words echo in my mind. It is coming for me. Now I wonder if his death was not merely a culmination, but an offering, a grim prelude to something far worse. As I write this, I feel the presence of that same malevolence lingering in the air, a weight pressing down on my every thought. The institution itself seems to hum with its resonance, its walls alive with whispers and tremors that I can no longer dismiss as mere imagination. The staff has become restless, their movements hesitant, their eyes darting towards shadows that seem to lengthen unnaturally. I fear the worst is yet to come. Mr. Bennet's death was not the end. It was a beginning, a gateway to a darkness that now threatens to consume us all. Sanctuary Meadows is no longer a place of healing, but a threshold, a vessel for forces beyond our comprehension. Tonight, I shall keep vigil, though I doubt any mortal precaution can protect me from what lurks in these halls. If I am wrong, if the light of day dawns without further incident, then I will count myself fortunate. But if I am right, if the darkness claims me as it did Mr. Bennet, let these words stand as a warning to those who follow. God help us all. Dr. Michael Thornton, Sanctuary Meadows Psychiatric Institution. Personal Journal, June 10th, 1922. I had thought the horrors of yesterday were the zenith of this ordeal, the apex of the unimaginable. But what unfolded last night has convinced me that I have gravely underestimated the malignancy that has taken root in this institution. The death of Mr. Bennet was but a herald, a grim overture to the symphony of dread that now plays within these cursed walls. The events began just before midnight. The air was oppressive, laden with an electric charge that prickled the skin and set the nerves alight. The staff, reduced now to a skeletal crew, moved with the furtive haste of prey sensing a predator in the shadows. The patients were restless, their murmurs rising in a discordant hum that seemed to echo unnaturally through the corridors. It was as though the very building had become a resonator for their collective unease. It was then that the noises begun, low, guttural reverberations that emanated from the depths of the institution. At first, I mistook them for the groaning of the old pipes, but as they grew louder, more distinct, it became clear that these sounds were no product of machinery. They were organic, alive, imbued with a malicious intent that made the very air vibrate with their malignancy. I took a lantern and ventured forth, my steps hesitant as I made my way to the basement. the presumed origin of the unholy cacophony. The shadows cast by the flickering flames seemed to writhe upon the walls, forming shapes that dissolved before the eye could fully grasp them. I found the descent almost unbearable, as if the stairs themselves resisted my progress, each step a battle against an unseen force that sought to drive me back. The basement was a place I had rarely visited, a repository for forgotten supplies and the detritus of years past. Yet, as I entered, I scarcely recognized it. The air was suffused with a cloying dampness, and the walls seemed to glisten as though coated in some foul secretion. The smell was overpowering, a stench of decay mingled with something far older, a miasma that clung to the throat and filled the lungs with its vile taint. And there, in the center of the room, I saw it. A sigil etched into the stone floor with a precision that defied mortal hands. The lines shimmered faintly, as if imbued with an inner light, their shapes forming a geometry that hurt the mind to comprehend. Around the sigil were scattered objects, shards of glass, fragments of bone, and what appeared to be human teeth. These offerings, if such they were, radiated an aura of desecration so profound that I felt an almost irresistible urge to flee. But before I could retreat, the sigil began to pulse, its light growing stronger and casting the room into a kaleidoscope of shifting hues. The guttural noises I had heard earlier rose to a deafening crescendo, forming a cadence that was at once alien and deeply sickeningly familiar. It was a language, not of words, but of intent. A communication that bypassed the ears and drove itself directly into the mind. As I stood paralyzed, the air within the room began to coalesce, forming a shape that defied description. It was a presence, vast and unknowable, its form an ever-shifting amalgam of shadow and substance. Eyes, if they could be called such, opened within its depths, staring at me with an intelligence that was utterly alien, utterly malevolent. The entity spoke, though not in any tongue I could understand. Its voice was a symphony of discord, a cacophony of tones that reverberated within my very soul. And though I could not hear and could not comprehend its words, their meaning was clear. I had trespassed, and now I would bear witness. The room began to warp around me, the walls distorting and folding into themselves as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Visions assailed me, images of realms beyond comprehension where cyclopean structures loomed under alien stars, and beings of impossible form writhed in eternal torment. I saw the sigil again and again, etched into the landscapes that defied the laws of nature. Its purpose clear. It was a gateway, a conduit for forces that should have never been allowed to enter our world. I do not know how I escaped. My next memory is of stumbling into the light of dawn, my clothes damp with sweat and my hands trembling uncontrollably. The staff found me in the main corridor, incoherent and raving. They attempted to question me, but I could offer no explanation, no account for what I had witnessed. The sigil remains burned into my mind, its lines etched as clearly in my memory as they were in the basement floor. I now know that this institution has become a nexus, a focal point for forces beyond mortal comprehension, and I fear that the entity I glimpsed is but a fragment, a mere shadow of the true horror that lies on the other side. I can no longer remain here. Whatever is happening within these walls is beyond my ability to confront or contain. Yet I am gripped by the terrible knowledge that fleeing will not save me. The thing I saw in the basement was not bound to this place. It is now bound to me. I must warn the world, though I fear my words will be dismissed as the ravings of a madman. Still, I must try. If these events are but the prelude to a greater calamity, then humanity must be prepared. Though I doubt any preparation could suffice. The end is coming. I can feel it. A creeping dread that pervades every waking moment and haunts my dreams. The gateway has been opened, and what lies beyond is stirring. May God forgive us, for we have gazed too deeply into the abyss, and now the abyss gazes back. Michael. Statement ends. It's tempting to dismiss this as delusion, a mind cracking under the weight of stress, isolation, and superstition. But there's a precision in the language that doesn't sit right. The symbols, the lights, the sounds from the walls, too consistent across his notes to be the product of hallucination alone. There's a coherence that feels deliberate. Sanctuary Meadows burned less than a year later. The fire consumed the entire structure in a single night. Official reports cite an electrical fault, but eyewitness accounts speak of something else. Lights moving against the wind, shadows seen within the flames, screams that carried far beyond the grounds. No bodies were ever recovered. Thornton's notes mention Mr. Bennett's paintings several times. None were found after the fire, though scattered references suggest at least one resurfaced decades later in a private collection. That gallery also burned. The coincidence is difficult to ignore. It's as if whatever haunted those canvases refused to stay confined to the paint and frame. The doctor's phrasing troubles me. It is bound to me. He seemed to believe that understanding what he'd seen was enough to tether it to him, that knowledge itself was the conduit. I don't know whether this madness or revelation, but either way, he wasn't wrong to be afraid. There's no record of Thornton after that final entry. No body, no obituary, nothing. The fire erased him as completely as it did the rest of Sanctuary Meadows. Maybe that was mercy. Anomaly code H-386-Delta. Classification: Biophoric entity. Status: active/recurring/sentient. Priority: high. End recording. The Obscure Dossier is a podcast created by K.W. Krieger, licensed under a Creative Commons Non-Attribution Non-Share-alike 4.0 international license. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow us on Reddit at The Obscure Dossier, like us on Facebook, and as always, thanks for listening.